What are the Panthers' top needs once the draft rolls around later on this month? I'll tell you right here on Locked On Panthers.
You are Locked On Panthers, your daily Carolina Panthers podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Welcome into another edition of the Locked On Panthers podcast, a part of the Locked On Podcast Network. I'm your host, as always, Julian Council, talking Carolina Panthers with you every Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday. Your team every day. That's our motto here on the Locked On Podcast Network. Subscribe or follow the show for free on YouTube or wherever you listen to your favorite podcast. And be sure to follow me, Julian Council, on Twitter at Julian Council, where on Fridays throughout the offseason, I'm right here on the show answering your weekly Friday mailbag questions, either at me or DM me. But follow me first on Twitter at Julian Council to get your questions in for this week's edition of the weekly Friday mailbag right here on Locked On Panthers. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Make every moment more. Right now, new customers get $200 in bonus bets with any winning $5 bet. That's $200 if your bet wins. Visit FanDuel.com/LockedOn to get started today. We continue our countdown to the 2024 NFL Draft up in Detroit, Michigan on today's show. Let's discuss the Carolina Panthers' primary draft needs, secondary draft needs, and also a few other positions that sneakily the Panthers may want to address later on this month in April when they roll up to Detroit for the 2024 NFL Draft. Let's go ahead and start the show by talking about the primary needs for the Carolina Panthers. I look at three position groups that I feel like the Panthers should address night two, which is day one for them once they get to the draft later on this month. Wide receiver, edge, and corner. Starting off with wide receiver. Yes, the Panthers made a fantastic trade, sending Dante Jackson and a 6th-round pick in exchange for Deontay Johnson and a 7th-round pick to Pittsburgh. Great deal by Dan Morgan. In principle, you needed to bring somebody with Deontay Johnson's talent and ability to separate to help out Bryce Young this offseason. They've gone out there and they brought in a young veteran wide receiver, and I love it. Adam Thielen, he's back for another year after having 100 receptions and 1,000 yards and 4 touchdowns last year. Can he replicate that in 2024? I doubt he'll have the same kind of numbers now with Johnson's presence, but certainly I look at Adam Thielen as another guy this year who can have 750 yards for the Panthers, playing primarily in that slot role. And then behind them, you have Jonathan Mingo here. David Moore is here for a second time. Will he make the roster this time? TBD, but I doubt it. Terrace Marshall Jr. still hanging around. Is this finally the time where he breaks out and shows us the talent that led the Panthers to take him 39th overall in the draft a couple years ago and had teams across the league grading him as a first-round grade? Will that finally happen for Terrace Marshall? I don't know. But looking at things right now, I ask you this. Are you content with Deontay Johnson, Adam Thielen, Jonathan Mingo, and the rest? Do you think that's enough for Bryce Young this season? Just by itself. I understand what they've done on the offensive line at the guard spots. I understand with Dave Canales coming in here, how the offense is going to look different. They should be able to run the football more effectively with Chuba Hubbard behind those guards. I understand all of that, but just ignoring, which you can't totally ignore, but separating the wide receiver position from what they did up front and what they have in the backfield behind Bryce Young this offseason, is that enough for you? Adam Thielen, Deontay Johnson, Jonathan Mingo, and the rest. For me, no, it's not. It's not enough at all. I'm not a Mingo believer, as y'all know. Adam Thielen's going to be 34. He ain't getting any younger. I don't think you can depend on the same production he gave you last year this season, and that's fine. He does not have to have another 1,000-yard receiving season. I'm just cautioning you that there could be a significant drop-off because Father Time is undefeated, and we know the wear and tear of playing football and what it does to these athletes' bodies. The Panthers need to be prepared. And Deontay Johnson, while I think it's going to work, there's also a possibility where it does not work. So for me, I told y'all 2 Fridays ago during the weekly Friday mailbag when someone asked me about the second round, what the Panthers may not do, and what I think they should do. I believe at 33, right now it's Panthers hold the first pick in the second round. They should be aggressively targeting a starting wide receiver there at 33. That to me is the top need, even after adding Johnson and all the other things they've done through free agency, which I believe was a positive, successful free agency period. The Panthers need a wide receiver. They do not have a wide receiver one. I don't know if they're going to be able to get one per se at 33, but they should still be looking for a long-term option there at the wide receiver position with the 33rd overall pick in the second round. Edge rusher, that is also a massive need for the Carolina Panthers. It is absolutely phenomenal that they were able to bring in DJ Woonem, then sign Jadeveon Clowney to be their starting edge rushers. It's great that they did it, to be able to beat out the Jets, to beat out the Ravens, bring back one of the native sons of the Charlotte area back home to play for the hometown team. You'll love this story. And it's not like Clowney hasn't been a good player in the past. He's been mercurial. He's had his seasons where he's been off, he's been on, and he talked about it last Friday where he had something to prove last year, and he still has something to prove. And I said on the show yesterday, if he does get double-digit sacks, I'll be right here wearing a Jadeveon Clowney jersey with Clowney right here on my chest, the number 7. I will gladly do it because I want him to succeed because he's a Carolina Panther, and hell, he's from the area. That makes things even more better for me when it comes to talking about a player on this team. But he's got to do it. And Woonem was able to play well last year with the 8 sacks. He had 8 sacks a couple seasons prior to that as well. Now stepping into a role as a primary starter where a team really believes, okay, you could be one of our guys for the next 4 or so years. Can he do it? Can Clowney step up and do it again consistently, which he has not done since his last 2 seasons in Houston, where he was a Pro Bowler? In his words, if he plays 17 games, he will be a Pro Bowler. And my hope is that he is telling us the truth, and that will be a fact if he's able to stay healthy and play all 17 games this upcoming season in 2024. But understand this, y'all. The Panthers can move off of DJ Woonem after this season. Jadeveon Clowney have not seen the terms of his contract as far as the breakdown of whether it's really a 1-year deal or a 2-year deal. I don't know about that. But what I know is neither one of those guys guaranteed to be here for the long haul for the Panthers. Clowney because of age, and Woonem just because it's still an unknown whether he truly can be, I don't even know whether it's a top-level edge rusher, but a solid starter. Can he be like a Mario Addison in Carolina? Can you get that out of DJ Woonem? Different scheme, I understand, but as far as production of what the Panthers got out of Mario Addison, can they get that out of DJ Woonem? That is my hope. Looking at the last 2 drafts, though, the Panthers have tried to address the edge rusher position. Amari Barno 2 years ago, last year DJ Johnson, and in the past 2 seasons, neither one of them have produced at the level that makes you feel comfortable that they're going to eventually turn into a high-level starter where you're totally good with Clowney, with Woonem, with Caleb Chase on a former first-round pick who's been a bust up to this point, and then with Barno and with DJ Johnson, Eku Leota, and the rest that are in that edge rusher group. The Panthers need to find somebody to come in here. They may not get another Brian Burns. They're not going to get someone likely who has the same talent as Jared Verse in the top edge rushers. But you're not telling me you can't. You're telling me that Chris Braswell or Adisa Isaac or Chop Robinson, potentially Darius Robinson, one of those guys, and maybe somebody else, they can't step in here and be a solid rotational piece this year and then potentially build up to be maybe that number 2 edge rusher where maybe it's next year where you get the top guy, as someone had alluded to on a weekly Friday mailbag this past Friday, that the Panthers should wait to go get someone until next year in the first round. I think they're going to be in position next year to be in the top 5 or top 10 and to get that edge rusher, but the needs may change over the course of the next coming year. We will see. But to me, they should be looking at an edge rusher maybe at 33, but certainly at 39, and that's what they want to do. The other position group that the Panthers really need to address, in my opinion, on night 2 of the NFL draft, day 1 for them, is corner. Dane Jackson, been a starter in Buffalo the last couple of seasons, former 7th-round pick. Dan Morgan was banging on the table late in the draft 4 years ago saying, you got to take this kid out of Pitt. And now that kid from Pitt is back to being a Panther, but wearing black and blue here in Carolina. D-Jack's gone. Dane Jackson's here in Carolina, and I hope it works out. I think it's a nice story. He's been a solid player. His numbers, when you look at Pro Football Reference and Pro Football Focus, have been fairly middling, but that's going to be the case for a guy who is a spot starter in your third corner. You're not going to be asking a lot out of him. Now in Carolina, they are. They're asking him to come in and replace Dante Jackson. They're asking him to come in and be healthy and to be the starter opposite of Jaycee Horn, who we know has struggled with his health through the first 3 years of his career in the NFL with the Panthers. Troy Hill's also back, plus 30 years old, had a great season last year playing in that nickel role. I expect him to be back there again. And according to many draft experts, this is a strong nickel draft class where the Panthers could find someone who they can replace Troy Hill with. I still think, though, they need to be looking at a long-term starter. The decision on Jaycee Horn's fifth-year option looms. We're going to find out in a month's time, early May, whether the Panthers say yes or no to the fifth year for Jaycee Horn. And there are certainly benefits to doing it, and we will talk about it at some point in time between now and then when the Panthers have to make that decision. There are positives to doing it. There are negatives to doing it. And we know for most part what those are. I just look at it right now with Horn, with Jackson, with Hill. Who is the long-term starter the Panthers have? If Jaycee Horn's healthy, there's no question there. But Troy Hill, he's getting older. Dane Jackson, it could work. He could be the guy. I just still feel like there needs to be more competition in that room, and getting someone at 39, waiting until 65 there to begin the third round. I want to see that position group addressed night one for the Panthers, day two for the rest of the NFL, once we get down to, I believe, the 26th later on this month in April. So those are the primary needs for me: wide receiver, edge, and corner. What about the secondary needs? What other positions could the Carolina Panthers address, or really should address later on when they get to day three, maybe even in round 3 of the NFL draft? We'll talk about that here in just a moment on Locked on Panthers. This next segment is brought to us by our sponsor, BetterHelp. What's the first thing you do if you had an extra hour in your day? And Lord knows a lot of us need that extra hour. I know I was busy on Monday trying to put together the podcast, just wishing that I had just an extra hour just to sit around and catch my breath and maybe just relax and not do anything. A lot of us spend our lives wishing we had more time. The question is, time for what? If time was unlimited, how would you use it? The best way to squeeze that special thing into your schedule is to know what's important to you and make it a priority. Therapy can help you find what matters to you so you can do more of it. If you're thinking of starting therapy, get BetterHelp a try. It's entirely online, designed to be convenient, flexible, and suited to your schedule. Just filled a brief questionnaire to get matched with a licensed therapist and switch therapists anytime for no additional charge. Learn to make time for what makes you happy with BetterHelp. Visit BetterHelp.com/lockedon today to get 10% off your first month. That's BetterHelp, HELP.com/lockedon. We've addressed the primary needs for the Carolina Panthers, at least how I see it. Wide receiver, edge, corner. If they can get all three of those checked off on Friday night, I'll be happy. And if they don't, we'll see what they do. But potentially these next positions that I see as secondary needs, if they are addressed on that Friday evening, day 2 of the draft, night 1 for the Panthers, I can't be all that upset if they don't get a wide receiver, which would be upset about if they don't get a corner and if they don't get an edge rusher. So what are the other needs I think the Panthers should look at secondarily? It's center, it's tight end, it's linebacker. Let's start off with the center position. Austin Corbett, he's going to be the starting center for the Carolina Panthers this year. Yes, he's a vocal leader. As Dave Canales let us know last week during the NFL owners meetings down at the Ritz-Carlton in Orlando, Florida, that's great. He also does not have much experience playing in the interior at the center position in the NFL. His experience dates back to 2021, the OTA period back when he was playing with the Los Angeles Rams, and that was only due to injury, according to Jordan Rodriguez, our old friend who used to cover the Panthers for the Observer and the Athletic, now out there in LA covering the Rams. Eventually, the Rams decided to move Austin Corbett back over to right guard, and as we know, they went on to win the Super Bowl, and he came to Carolina, and he's been a good player for the Panthers when he's been on the field. Last season, missed the first 6 weeks of the season due to an ACL tear suffered in the final week of the 2022 season. Then he came back and really, in those 4 games, did not play well, then suffered a meniscus tear, and now we're waiting to see what he's going to look like at the center position. And there's not been any reporting or indication that he's going to miss time as far as when OTAs begin and when mandatory minicamp gets rolling. Now, what really matters the most is that he's out there ready to go on Cedar Street in Uptown Charlotte once the Panthers begin training camp in August or really late July. I still have my concerns whether Austin Corbett is going to be a good enough center for the Panthers. And if he has the experience, now he has experience being a starter in the NFL. Well, we talked to Mike Kay from the Charlotte Observer, and he talked about the Panthers really need to get Bryce Young an experienced veteran center. And they aren't doing that with Austin Corbett as far as having experience playing the center position. When it comes to being a veteran and having played on the offensive line, having familiarity with Bryce Young, he does have that. He does not have the requisite experience, though, in games, live bullets at the center position. And since Ryan Khalil left Carolina to go to the Jets for that one season before taking up a life in Hollywood, and good for Ryan, honestly, the Panthers have been searching far and wide in just the bowels of mediocrity when it comes to free agent prospect at the center position. Pat Elflein, he was the first choice. Matt Paradis was the first choice, and he was not great for the Panthers. Pat Elflein came in. He was also not very good. Bradley Bozeman appeared to be good until he wasn't last year. Now it's time for Austin Corbett. I brought this up on the show before when discussing how to fix the offensive line back in February, part of that series. And one of the things I brought up then was the Panthers have not drafted a center since Ryan Khalil back in 2007. Typically in the NFL, with quarterbacks, with tackles, those are the kind of positions where you just don't let those guys leave in free agency. You're not going to find a ton of high-level starting caliber centers in free agency. Now, there's guys like Tyler Biadasz and Lloyd Cushenberry who are available to the Commanders and to the Titans this offseason, and the Panthers were certainly interested in Cushenberry. Just they got outbid by the Titans. It happens. It's not like they didn't want him. They tried to do it, and they tried to move on from Corbett in a way and get an experienced center. It did not happen for them. I think this is the best course. I felt this way even before the Panthers struck out on getting a starting center via free agency earlier, or I guess middle of March last month. I want them to draft somebody. And according to many people, this is a deep center class. There are multiple starters. The Panthers won't even have to get a center right away. They could wait until potentially pick 101 to get a starting center. They could wait till 141 or 142. I just want them to do it. They need to get somebody. Like Ovicki, you want him to be your long-term left tackle. If you draft a center, you expect that guy to be your long-term center for the next decade, hopefully, and play at the level that Ryan Khalil played at. And he was taken in the second round. So the Panthers could certainly look to take someone at 33 or 39 if that's what they believe is best. Tight end. This was the one position, as I mentioned yesterday when looking at the depth chart for the Carolina Panthers, that they just did not address during free agency. They got rid of Hayden Hurst. He is now a Los Angeles Charger, and they brought back Tommy Trimble. Ian Thomas on a restructure, and Stephon Sullivan is back for another year. This is clearly, to me, the weakest group on the roster here in Carolina. Tommy Trimble, nice player. Solid in run blocking. The numbers, they're kind of iffy as far as whether that is true or not, but you watch the games, you see the tape. Tommy Trimble is clearly good when it comes to run blocking and in the run game for the Carolina Panthers. He's a good player overall. He's just, I don't think, is a great tight end. And the Panthers don't necessarily need a great tight end. They don't need a Greg Olsen per se, but you would like to have someone who you can really depend on in the passing game, which has not been the case for the last 4 or 5 seasons, really since Greg Olsen's foot just fell apart on him during the 2018 and 19 seasons prior to him spending his last year in Seattle. Like, the Panthers have not been able to make it happen. Ian Thomas lied to us at the beginning of his career. Tommy Trimble really has never shown it, although he's never been given the opportunity or the proper coaching, as he mentioned to us, at least the Observer last year during OTAs. And even after that, when he got the opportunity, it still looked a lot like it had looked in the past for Tommy Trimble. It's year 4 for him. It's contract year. It's an opportunity for him as tight end 1 to show that he truly is a tight end 1 in the NFL. I question whether that's the case. Either way, whether Trimble is or isn't, he's a free agent after this season. Ian Thomas is a free agent after this season. Stephon Sullivan is a free agent after this season. The Panthers have to be thinking ahead, and Dan Morgan has talked about they want to be a team that builds through the draft. You want to fill your holes in free agency, but you want to build through the draft. The best way for the Panthers to really identify the tight end position and to get it right is to build through the draft. So taking someone this upcoming month in the draft makes a lot of sense to me, especially when you look at the talent there and the severe question marks that there are at tight end. You can believe in Tommy Trimble. There's still a question of whether he actually can do it and will do it once we get to the season later on this fall. Linebacker is another need for the Carolina Panthers. Looking at Josey Jewell, who came over from Denver, where he spent the first 6 seasons of his career as a really good player as far as run stopping, not great in coverage, but you can say that about the vast majority of linebackers in the NFL. They've tried to make him smaller to help out when it comes to pass coverage, and they've are going to probably start to make them bigger as we see offenses get bigger. And that's just going to be the yin and yang of how football is going to work until the day it finally ends, which we hope really never happens because, God, I love football. But still, the Panthers have Josey Jewell now as their starting inside linebacker, along with Sha Thompson, as he's replacing Frankie Louvu, who said no to the Panthers bid and decided to go be a commie up in Washington playing for Dan Quinn. Looking at the structure of Josey Jewell's contract, he's likely the starter at one of the inside linebacker spots for the next 2 seasons. Just based off of they really can't save a lot of money by cutting him after this year, unless he's like I'm not going to say his name, number 52, as he was referred to during the 2020 season. Y'all know who I'm talking about. A rule guy who could not fill a gap to save his life and has not played the NFL since that fateful season. I don't think Jewell's going to play like that. I think he's going to be pretty good, and he understands the scheme. And when he's been healthy through the last 4 years, he's had over 100 tackles, and really any linebacker should be able to do that. They stay healthy. He's a good player, definitely good in the run game, and he'll be the starter at one of the spots for the next 2 seasons. Sha Thompson, though, he's a free agent after this season. There's some void years on that contract that were put in there last year when they reworked the deal, and he took a pay cut after asking people on Twitter whether you would take a pay cut at your job. He ended up doing that to stay in Carolina, where he wanted to be with his brothers and where he wanted to win a Super Bowl. Well, Dante Jackson, his brother, is gone. Frankie Louvu, his brother, is gone. Brian Burns, his brother, is gone. And you have to imagine after this season, him, Sha Thompson, another one of the brothers here in Carolina, is also going to be gone on that defense. So we'll see how he bounces back off the leg injury. I can't see him being here much longer. It's not a bad time to look for a leader in the middle of that defense. And I know there's somebody out there in Raleigh and NC State fans. It's a great time to be living. If you're a State fan, the men's and women's team going to the Final Four, Peyton Wilson, stud, could be there if they stay. I think he probably is there at 39. He's a first-round talent. The only problem Peyton Wilson has been tore up his knee in high school. He tore up his knee a couple times at State, but when he was healthy, as we saw this past year, best linebacker in the nation, best defensive player in the nation, and in the ACC, according to certain people out there. And I don't really disagree with a lot of those people. Anyways, he's a good player, and he absolutely looks like the kind of guy that you would want to have. The instincts, the speed, it's all there. And let's not even sit here and act like somebody at a linebacker spot can have significant injuries multiple times and then not go on to have a great career, because we saw it here in Carolina with Thomas Davis. I'm not trying to say that's what's going to happen with Peyton Wilson. All I'm saying is anyone who wants to be a naysayer, and excuse my language, there's that fact that would happen to Thomas Davis. Not saying it's going to be what's going to happen with Peyton Wilson. I just think he's a good player, and I'm not all that concerned about the injuries, and I think this would be a great time to bring him in this year in the draft. So those are the secondary needs: center, tight end, linebacker. If they want to address those in the second or third round, okay, cool. I can dig it. I still would rather the ones I brought up earlier, wide receiver, corner, and edge, be addressed. We can't be too mad if they do that, and especially can't be mad if they get any of those positions in the 4th round or later on at 141 and at 142. But there are some other position groups the Panthers could address. And I've already mentioned 6, which goes to tell you just how much of a rebuild this is in Carolina and how we should be focused on getting the football right, which is what Dave Canales has been preaching to us anytime he's gotten in front of a microphone. I want to talk about a couple of positions the Panthers could also address later on in the draft. I'll talk about that here in just a moment on Locked On Panthers. Say goodbye to busted brackets, because FanDuel lets you bet on every game of the tourney, whether you're betting on a big upset or a number 1 seed. It's time to go dancing on America's number 1 sportsbook. And man, what a time to be alive if you're an NC State Wolfpack fan, alum, confidant. What a time for the Pack, the men's and women's teams going to the men's and women's Final Four. Congratulations to Wes Moore. Congratulations to Kevin Keats, to all the student athletes. Let me put that in quotes. Student athletes who are going to be a part of the Final Four this weekend. And is there a better place to go to bet on the Pack? And if you bet on the Pack to win a national championship, you may be making a lot of money right now. New customers, and that could be you, especially if you're a State fan, get $200 in bonus bets. If your first $5 bet wins, that's $200 to use on point spreads, money lines. You can even pick who's going to win it all. I think it's going to be UConn, but feels like 83. Just visit FanDuel.com/lockedon and bet on college hoops until they cut the nets down. We've addressed the primary needs. We've looked at the secondary needs, but still looking at this roster, there's some other position groups that if the Panthers addressed it during the draft, I wouldn't be upset about it. And quite honestly, I feel like they'd be pretty justified in doing it. Now, I don't look at them being ahead of the other 6 positions that we've already gone over: wide receiver, edge, corner, tight end, center, linebacker. Man, you look at the roster and you look at what they did in free agency, getting some veterans that were coming off of their rookie deals and then signing them to deals that weren't all that long term. There's still some serious question marks about who are going to be the mainstays here in Carolina as we go through this rebuild of Dan Morgan as GM and Dave Canales here as the head coach, and hopefully Bryce Young as a starting quarterback for the long haul. A couple of positions I think that they could also address, and I'm sure a few of you agree with this, and I'm sure a few of you disagree with this. Defensive line, running back, and safety are the positions that I'm looking at. Starting off with the D-line. Derek Brown, he's set to play his 5th-year option, but there should be an extension coming soon, and emphasis on should. I've let it be known what I believe the Panthers should do. They should extend Derek Brown. Don't fool around. We saw things played out with Brian Burns, how you let that relationship deteriorate, whether it's Burns asking for too much money or the Panthers just being cheap and not want to giving it to him. We're past it, okay? He's gone. It's unfortunate, but the Panthers have had a nasty, nasty trend of trading away successful first-round picks. McCaffrey, Moore, Burns. Don't let it be Derek Brown. This is a position where you need to have someone as talented as him. We have seen the market for defensive tackles just go up. Chris Jones got a ton of money, and now Derek Brown's not one of those kind of pass rushers, but still, Jones got a bunch of money. We saw Aaron Donald, another pass rusher, made, and when he was in the NFL, there's a lot of guys getting paid at the defensive tackle position, and it's not bad to have an edge, have a run stopper in the middle. And who knows, maybe Derek Brown turns into being someone who can be a 5 or 6 sack guy per season. I don't think that's ever really what we should be worried about whether he's going to be. He's a damn good player and he deserves his money. So Derek Brown, I'm expecting him to be sticking around here long term, but it is the Panthers and they love to get rid of first-round picks. So we'll see how that works out. A'Shawn Robinson, looking at his contract, we talked about it yesterday briefly. It's pretty flexible. The Panthers get rid of him after a season if they want to. Shy Tuttle, the way that deal was done by Samir Suleiman and by Scott Fitter was just bad because he had to stick around, and maybe he'll play well this year. But if he's not going to have an uber productive season to bounce back off of what he did last year, this will be his last year in Carolina, which means the Panthers will be looking for 2 new starters potentially next year along the defensive line. Go ahead and draft somebody and then get that guy prepared. We'll see if Nick Thurman or if LeBron Ray or Raekwon Williams, any of those 3 can end up ascending to that spot down the road. I don't know if I want to wait, but the Panthers only have so many picks. This is another position group that you could see them addressing. And I have looked at a couple mock drafts that have had the Panthers taking defensive linemen later on in the draft in day 3. Running back, final year for Chuba Hubbard, who's going to be the workhorse back as we are expecting. We'll see what happens with Miles Sanders. I do think he's still a prime candidate to be a post-June 1 cut. If he's not, if he plays this season, unless he's able to win back the role, or if they're really going to be dedicated to running the football, which Dave Canales said they're going to be stubborn about doing it, and they want to have a kind of a pseudo smash and dash deal here in Carolina. Hard to see Miles Sanders coming back for a 3rd season. Now, I do respect the fact that he said he wants to be a Carolina Panther, that he signed a 4-year deal, and he intends on honoring that 4-year deal. It's just whenever the team doesn't want to do it, that's when he'll exit. You appreciate that, but also understand, well, yeah, that's kind of how these things work a lot of times, that you who sign a big deal and don't perform, you're going to stay to that deal. It's really up to the team on whether they want to stick to it after you've struggled and they've been made a fool of for giving you the money. That's just show business, I suppose. Looking at Chuba, his rookie deal is over after this year. Miles Sanders could be gone come June, could stick around. Hard to believe, though, that this time next year on April 2nd, we're talking about Miles Sanders still as a Carolina Panther. We will see whether that's the case or not. I don't really feel like they have to get a running back. Y'all know how I feel about running backs. Standard minimum wage or federal minimum wage, $7.25 an hour, 29 hours a week, no overtime, no hazard pay, none of that. No holiday pay, no vacation. Just use them, lose them, use them, abuse them, lose them, whatever. You know what I mean. Just you can find a running back in the 7th round. You can find a running back anywhere and have success with them. We saw what they did 2 years ago with Chuba and with Deontay Foreman. You don't have to pay a running back a lot of money to get production. The Chiefs are winning with a 7th round running back. Yes, that Patrick Mahomes. My point still stands. They can address it. I would be fine just waiting another year, because all you're going to do if you bring a guy in and say he even plays, he's going to get a little bit of wear and tear on his body. I would just wait till next year. Get a younger player with less mileage, then bring him here to Carolina and run him into the ground for 4 seasons, then move on. I'm sorry to running backs everywhere that I feel this way. Safety is the final one. For me, it's just like Xavier Woods, Jordan Fuller, and Nick Scott are all free agents this upcoming season or after the season. So Woods, good player. Fuller and Scott were both brought in as they have experience getting back to LA with Ejiro Evero, know the system. Scott wasn't good last year in Cincinnati. Fuller's going to be the starter. You have 3 guys who are veterans who understand how to play the safety position, and they can play it fairly well at certain points in time. They may not be here. And Jamie Robinson barely got in the field. Sam Franklin is still seen as more of a special teams guy. And Alex Cook, he showed some signs last year. I don't know if that's what they want to do, is transition him into being a starter next season. That's a position group where just looking a year from now in the draft, that is going to be where the Panthers are going to want to address. Unfortunately, hate to be Debbie Downer, they don't have a 2nd round pick next year. So we'll see when they're able to do it. But they could do it this year. Don't think the guy would play a lot, but it's something worth considering for the Carolina Panthers. So those are the primary, secondary, and some other low-key positions the Panthers could address in the NFL draft later on this month. But that's going to wrap up this edition of the Locked On Panthers podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, hosted by yours truly, Julian Council. Again, y'all, subscribe or follow the show for free on YouTube or wherever you listen to your favorite podcast. And be sure to follow me, Julian Council, on Twitter at Julian Council, where on Fridays, I'm right here on the show throughout the offseason answering your weekly Friday mailbag questions, either at me or DM me. To get your questions into me right now, like now, you heard it right now. Send me in your questions. But in the meantime, be safe, be happy, be whole as always, and forever keep pounding. I'll talk to y'all on Wednesday, where Trevor Sikkema of Pro Football Focus, he'll be over here to talk about 2nd round wide receivers and edge prospects for the Carolina Panthers.